Well, we have a quorum, so we're going to come out of recess. Should I,
Senator Merrill hasn't done a bill yet.
thank you. We're out of recess, and I'm calling on the good Senator Prescott to introduce Senate Bill 289, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chairman.
Give me a $25 raise.
I have an amendment for the committee to look at, and I'll review that amendment.
You're going to speak on your amendment,
Yes,
Senator, or you're going to speak on the amendment? Okay.
This amendment is a result of working with the Clerks Association on multiple occasions. First, I'd like to thank Representative Tucker, Representative Itza, Senator Carson, and Senator Bradley for sponsoring the bill. People I really admire and appreciate their support. The bill is about obtaining a ballot. Obtaining a ballot would require presentation of a valid photo identification. That would be simply placing a picture with a name.
So we don't have these
Russ, could you wait just a second till we all have copies of that so we can follow along with it, please?
Certainly will, Senator.
I guess the answer is no. Everyone that's here that wants to speak is good.
He's coming right downstairs.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hey, let's have a round of applause for the amendment. The amendment's covered.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Gee, Russ, it looks like you were busy the weekend. You didn't have much time to watch the game, did you? Okay, we're out of recess. Go ahead, Senator. We have your amendment.
Yes. Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. As I mentioned, this amendment was the result of working with the Town Clerks Association, wanting to make the voting process smooth for our coming elections. So we worked with the Senate Clerks Association and started with the framework of the bill as introduced. Wanted to just mention that this is a photo identification right at the point where the voter comes to the checklist table. Let's not confuse it with voter registration or confuse it with domicile verification, which is done at the time of registering to vote. This is at the point where the person's name and address is on the checklist. They come before the checklist and they would present a valid photo identification. And that would be a picture and a name. The identifications that are valid are listed, A through E and F on the amendment. Driver's license by the state of New Hampshire, identification card by the motor vehicles, armed services identification card, United States passport, any other valid photo identification issued by federal, state, county, or municipal government, a valid student identification card.
Russ, can I interrupt you and ask you a question?
Certainly.
On F, the one you just mentioned, a valid student identification card. What is on that student? Colleges give an ID out. It's been a long time since I was in college, and in my day they didn't give IDs out. But what is on that card that lets people know where this person lives? Is it a dormitory address or the real home address?
It is a very recognizable identification card by those people that are trained to check photo IDs or just be at the checklist. It's recognizable whether it be a university in New Hampshire, whether it be a university of the you're signaling you want to speak again. Sorry.
Okay. All this ID has a picture on it. It doesn't have an address. talk about
Picture and name.
where you
Picture
are.
and name is adequate.
That it's Russ Prescott that is coming into Raymond to vote. And that really is Russ Prescott who's asking for the ballot.
It's a picture and a name, and part of a valid photo identification list.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And it's clearly identified. People that are at the polling position understand and know what they're looking for. The next is photo identification not authorized in those above, A through E, can be determined to be legitimate by the supervisor of the checklist or town or city clerk. And that's provided that any person can challenge that voter. And then in H, the verification of person's identity by a moderator or supervisor of the checklist or the town or city clerk, provided that anyone can challenge that verification of an ID. So these forms of identification, whether it's personal knowledge or the list of identifications are there, allows a person to be handed a ballot. If a voter, starting at section 3, line 10 of page 2, if a voter on the checklist executes a challenge voter affidavit in accordance with paragraph 1, like above, they shall be subject to RSA 91A, meaning they may not want to be have this public, that if they do fill out an affidavit of the challenge voter, they may not want that to be public knowledge, and that would be not subject to 91A. Certain people in our communities may want that. And part 4, let's not go there. Let's say that the person does not come up with a photo ID that's valid and find out that, well, you don't have a valid ID. That does not mean they do not get a ballot to vote. Their name is on the checklist. They're not identified by the clerk. They may have been challenged. They would fill out a challenged voter identification form. When they fill out that challenged voter identification form, you see in line 12 that the Secretary of State, after they have voted, will take that information and cause a letter of identity verification to be mailed by first class and followed up. If it's unsuccessful, that the Secretary of State is concerned, it's followed up by the Attorney General. There will be a voter identification advisory committee established by this bill so that we could follow the enactment of voter identification. The enactment is done in phases. I suggest that before we walk, we should crawl. Before we run, we should walk. And this is done in phases, it's stepped in. Whereas the first time that the person is asked for a voter ID, if they are voting for the first date of voting for public office, they will be asked this fall, so if it is enacted, they will be asked for the photo identification. And if they don't have it, they'll say that it's going to be required at a future date. And the future date is 2016. So there's plenty of notification, plenty of time for people of New Hampshire to become adjusted with presenting a picture ID that is valid for the state of New Hampshire. And it's a process of bringing the public up to speed on the new law. There's also the opportunity for someone that does not have a valid identification that they can have a voucher to get a identification from the Department of Motor Vehicles for voting, and that would be provided, therefore, at no charge for voter identification only. I'd like to say, to end the testimony, that I'm open to friendly amendments. And I've worked rather hard on this bill with all those concerns that came to me during the first voter identification round with the last identification bill that we passed from the Senate, passed it to the House, and that the governor vetoed. So I've tried to work with as many groups and as many individuals as possible, and I'm glad that I worked with the Town Clerks Association because they were so helpful in the process of saying what would be the pitfalls, what would what would keep the lines moving, and so that everyone has an opportunity to vote without being obstructed. No one to be turned away from the polls. All those questions were talked over in an open executive committee meetings with the town clerks, and we accomplished a lot to bring forward this amendment. So I'm open to friendly amendments along that same process of openness with the whole state of New Hampshire. Secondly, I'd like to point out that this is not a provisional ballot bill. We're not talking about secondary voting. We're talking about people who come to the polls, present their ID, not presented a provisional ballot if they don't have an ID. They fill out a challenge voter affidavit and vote. And it would be done in a process that is normal to the voting areas, that people do fill out challenge voter affidavits. That's how our system works. We're working within the way the system works today. And last, I want to let you know that this is not a voter verification of address bill. This is not a voter verification of domicile bill. This is not a registration bill, a voter registration bill. Those things are done before the person's name is on the checklist. Once the person's name is on the checklist, now we're just for them to present a valid photo identification spelled out here in this bill. And if they do not have it, there's an opportunity to still vote that very same day and stay within the streamline of how people vote in New Hampshire. And with that, I'd like to close my testimony. Thank you very much, Senator, for letting me come before you.
GrokTV.